Yeah, welcome all to this talk on rescuing broken Drupal sites. My name is Matt Corks. Before anyone asks, yes, there's a link to the slides right here on the session page. They're just on Google Docs, so you can frantically scribble along or just go look at this later. Yeah. About me, this is my profile on Drupal.org. As you can see, I've been doing Drupal for quite a while now. Currently with Evolving Web, previously the Linux Foundation, a company called Kumbit, etc. This is the company I work for. We'll talk more about that later. Yeah, we're based in Montreal. We do a lot of migration, training, and just a full-service Drupal agency. Everything but hosting, I guess. All right. And the network's even working. That's great. Oh. Yeah. So the motivation for this talk was that I was at a place I worked for 2 jobs ago. I had to recover a lot of sites that had had severe security intrusions, most notably from the Drupal security vulnerability, which was called Drupalgeddon. It was definitely the worst I've ever seen in the Drupal community. It was quite a pain. And then one job ago, I had to recover one particular Drupal site that was also a rescue project, not because of a security intrusion, but because it had been pretty mismanaged by a previous vendor. And I started to think about all the similarities and overlap between these two cases. So the end goal in both cases was to take a site that was clearly failing in some ways that weren't very well defined, and get to a point where I could actually work with it, where I could tell a site owner that yes, I could add a feature, and I know it's going to work. I want the site in a known good state that actually makes sense. There's no strange code or something weird in the database that's going to screw up my site next week. I know it's there, and it makes sense to me. Because if you don't have that, then it's like you're working with a house of cards, and you can't ever add anything on because it might make everything else fall apart. Has anyone here been in a situation a little like this? Yeah. A bit. This is a bit of group therapy going on here. Yeah. I figured I wasn't the only one, which is why I proposed this talk. Yeah. So security incursions. Drupalgeddon was just the biggest, the worst one. But I've seen other ones with other CMSs, such as like ancient versions of WordPress, for example, are also pretty good for this. Inexperienced prior vendor and/or multiple levels of outsourcing. I think it might have been 4 or 5 in the end, levels of like somebody passing it off to somebody else, and then they outsource to somebody else, or they're telling the previous people, etc. And then, I mean, even if the people involved have the best intentions and are perfectly competent, it's just you're playing broken telephone, and it's never going to work. So I'll start with intrusion recovery. Someone's got into your laptop and you don't know how necessarily, but you figured out somehow that something's wrong. So what do you do? So the first question people have is usually why their site is getting picked on. People often think that they were targeted. In my experience, that's extremely rare. Usually it's a script kiddie who's just copying and pasting and is just testing things out. Usually they don't know who you are. They don't care who you are. If you are targeted, then you've got a whole other set of problems. But I personally have never seen that, and I've recovered dozens of sites that have been broken into, as well as a few servers. So people do this because they just want to make money, which is the reason most people are building websites. It's the same thing. So they want to put in code to drive to take advantage of your very popular website with all its wonderful content and drive that to their website, in which they're selling Viagra or whatever people are selling on these websites today. So they already have a site and they're just trying to take advantage of your Google page ranking or something like that. Secondarily, they're trying to make money directly from you, which is a little harder. So let's say you have credit card numbers going through your site. Fun fact, even if all you host is an iframe or a link pointing to PayPal, you still have PCI compliance obligations. If you collect identifiable information like a name or an address connected to the person who's about to make a PayPal or any credit card transaction on your website, you still have responsibilities to be careful with that information because it could be connected to the credit card later. There's a lot of requirements about this, and there's in fact a white paper written about Drupal and PCI compliance that I would encourage you to read if money goes through your site in any way, because you may be liable without knowing it, and that's never a good thing. Yeah, so there's credit card numbers. People like to steal email addresses so that they can send spam and, in theory, make money in those more traditional ways. We once, at the company I work for now, we once discovered a server had been broken into because somebody was trying to mine bitcoins in our virtual machine. So they weren't. I don't think they got any. That wasn't going to go anywhere. It had enough power to run that small website, but not enough for them to make any bitcoins. But they were trying, and if they did that on 1,000 web servers, they probably made some money eventually. And exactly one time I've seen a case where somebody broke into a website in order to deface it publicly, probably for online bragging rights. In that case, it was somebody who claimed to be associated with the Free Syrian Army, something like someone working with Bashir al-Assad, or so he claimed, and wanted to put up their propaganda on the website of a small nonprofit that monitored the health of a river's ecosystem in Quebec. So not in any way political, but it was probably a script kiddie just testing their codes.
That happened to me too.
Yeah.
And it was a nothing site. It wasn't generating traffic, but somebody hacked it and they were the Free Iranian Army or something like that.
Yeah. So they're probably just testing. Yeah. Speaking of testing, if you have credit card transactions on your site, something that people like to do is collect lists of credit card numbers that they can use to go buy things on Amazon or whatever. And in order to test these, they make donations to charities. So if you're running the website of a charity that is taking credit card numbers, you might find yourself getting huge numbers of transactions, not the vast majority of which are not going to work because the credit card number is expired or something. But they're using you just to filter their list rather than doing that on Amazon, because then they'd get red flagged. So.
A quick but tangential question, because you might know the answer. Do you know if there's a financial reason why people make fake duplicate Facebook accounts of people? I've had about 6 people come to me in the last year and tell me, like, me, my aunt, my uncle, someone made a fake Facebook account of us. It's usually, you find that the last logged in IP was in China or something, so you know it's not personal. But I haven't been able to research what the...
If somebody accepts the friendship request, they'll message them, a direct message, and then try to get them to click on a link.
So it's just phishing?
It's phishing. It's all phishing.
Yeah.
So as soon as you get a friendship request from somebody you're already a friend with, report it to Facebook and they'll delete it.
Yeah, that's what I was telling people. I was just wondering if it was a financial thing, which I guess in the end it is.
Yeah.
It's all phishing.
Yeah, that's a good one. I personally am still boycotting Facebook. Maybe this is an age or generation thing or something, so I hadn't seen that one. But it makes sense that somebody's just trying to make money. I think I read once that for spam, in the case of spam email, they need 1 person in 1 million to click the link and actually give them money in order to make a profit. So, this is why you get so many of them, right? We should probably go after the 1 person in 1 million who clicks the link. They're probably easier to find than the people sending the spam. But
we'll have to send out a bunch of spam so they click back to us so we can get them.
Yeah. We'll send them spam to catch those people. That'll improve the situation.
I'm surprised that it used to be that generally all of this stuff was script kiddies, people playing around and hacking for no other reason than just for hobby rights, hobby interest or whatever.
Yeah.
But it seems like you're saying that it's flipped now and it's more financially driven.
Well, the script kiddies are the ones making the money.
So yes, they've become more financially interested than before.
Yeah, there's not. I mean, yeah, the people who are putting enough time into this to break into a large number of sites, they're getting money eventually in there.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my experience, and this is from what I've read, this is the case. And speaking of that, how did they get in? Unless you're worrying about an attacker with like nation-state level of resources, this is almost always, in every case that I've personally seen, it was a publicly disclosed vulnerability that wasn't patched. So these like maybe somebody found Drupalgeddon like 2 years before it was published, and then used it on 2 or 3 people that they really cared about. But probably that didn't happen a lot. This is just people finding things that have been public. So you need to be aware of what's public and to keep your stuff up to date. This could happen in core. This could happen in a contrib module. This could happen in a library. This could happen somewhere else in your server stack, in your SSH daemon. But the rest of the server stack is out of scope for this talk. I'll just say that you need to make sure that's up to date. This has recently become much more clear, but it used to be the case that when I would talk to Drupal developers about this, very few were aware that only stable releases with numbers greater than 1.0 of a contrib module had any support from the security team. The Drupal security team, if you tell them about a problem in like beta 17 or release candidate 8 or something of a module, will tell you that they're not going to support it. It's just too big for them to support every dev release. They can't do that. So now, helpfully, there's this little green shield icon right beside the download link on a module project on the project page. And if you see that, it's got support. If you don't, it doesn't. But it's
so if I have a module at 2.0, say, and I want to install the beta version, say 2.0.5x, is that going to be supported by the?
Yeah. No, it won't. I mean, and again, the icon now makes it very clear because, from what I could tell, very few people were aware of this in the past, and the security team would get lots of reports of bugs for dev branches. And I think we all know in the Drupal community, there's, for a variety of reasons, there's often modules that linger in development branch stage, even though they're like widely used for years and years, and they just never get a stable release. So unfortunately, you're using those at your own risk. So I've had clients tell me that I'm not allowed to use any of those on their site because just by institutional policy, they always want the security release. And so even though like 80% of people using the module are using the dev release because the stable release came out 2 years ago and doesn't have whatever patch, I couldn't use it on those projects. So be aware of that. Be aware the security announcement list. This is available by email, RSS, Twitter, probably other things too. You need to subscribe to this. They send out announcements for core, for contrib, and also just public announcements, all of which are very useful. There's very specific release windows for these, which you should be aware of. Unfortunately, they're a couple hours long, and so you have to wait right till the end to know if you get to go home. But since I'm guessing everyone here lives somewhere in North America, the times are within normal working hours for all of us, which makes our lives easier. If you're in Asia or Europe or something, it's not as convenient, but this isn't anyone's problem right here. External libraries. PHP Cast, which is a single sign-on system, which was used at my previous workplace, had an important security vulnerability. And so in this case, there is no mailing list that I'm aware of for that particular library. So the recommended procedure is to just go look at the website of the maintainers of that library and check it on a regular basis. Because this library is external to the Drupal module, it's not packaged with it by a Drupal.org policy. You need to know if there's a problem with it. And then, of course, everywhere else in the stack, if Apache isn't up to date, then you're going to have problems as well. But I'm assuming that you're paying somebody at your organization or a hosting company to look after that. So just make sure that's happening. Yeah. Any other questions about this?
I I noticed on the
Yep.
Drupal security email list, which I do
Yep.
monitor, they did announce one on a third party recently. They say it's not a module, but so many people use it, go fix it.
Yeah.
I forget what it was.
Yeah, they'll make announcements like that once in a while if there's like if they think it's particularly necessary, but don't count on getting those. Yeah, that's just that was a friendly reminder, and it's great that they did that. But yeah, don't count on getting them. So what do you do? What did the person do to your site? So the first thing you want to do is take your site offline. If you've happen to have a static copy of it that you can swap in, that's good. You want to have for forensic reasons, you want to make a backup of the current state. You want to figure out what they did and when. You need to know the time frame of the attack so that you can tell people when their passwords might have been exposed. You will need to look at all files that have changed since then. You will need to look at everything changes that were made in the database. If you're lucky, you can just look at the modified time in the Drupal database to figure out when nodes were changed. Often attackers add users with admin rights. Often attackers will just add a series of comments with links to spam sites. You should review your database log, and I also like to use the Unix file command to check through the file directory to look for PHP scripts. You should also search for PHP in nodes or JavaScript that's in the database. It's not really a good practice to have PHP that's executed directly from your database for any reason. If you can at all avoid it, that generally leads to a lot more problems. I think in panels in Drupal 7, you sometimes needed PHP to run to execute certain conditions to figure out what in order to have things show up in one place but not another. But that was the one I couldn't get rid of. But generally, you don't want to do that. So search for PHP in your database. Search for JavaScript in your database, and because it generally doesn't belong there. So if it's there, you should know that. File will tell you if like kitten.jpg is actually a JPEG file, or if it's a PHP file, or if it's some executable. These are all things that you can do to figure out what somebody has done to your server. Remember that if the attack was severe enough, somebody could have the equivalent of shell access to your web server and be running commands as the same user as Apache, like www-data, for example, and then could be changing things. I'll talk about this in a minute, but about how you can avoid those things happening. What else should I cover here? Yeah, so try to get an idea of what the person did on your site. You probably found out there was a problem because there was some symptom of this, like say the site owner reported a page that looked weird to them, a link to a spam site. So start there and work your way backwards, or look for similar things. You need to, in addition, you need to think about how you can recover user trust. So you need to be proactive and disclose the fact that there is a problem, when it started, when it ended, if their email addresses were revealed to the attacker, if it was also their credit card information, whatever was leaked. Users have this bad habit of using the same password on your website and also like 10 other websites. So they will need to know that you shouldn't do that, but many users do. So you should let them know that if they have an email address and a password, somebody might go and try that on Gmail, for example, to see if that also gets into their Gmail account, and then they've got other problems, assuming they're not using two-factor authentication or some other good practice like that. You should certainly you should clear the, be aware that the session tables hold keys in Drupal to connect you to cookies, so it lets somebody be logged in, like authenticates the users who are currently logged in. This means that if you clear the sessions table, you effectively log everyone out. This is a good thing to do sometime between when you found out you have a problem and before you put your site back online. You should also consider making people change their passwords. I'll get to that in a minute. But in terms of recovering user trust, again, PCI compliance. If you're dealing with financial transactions at all, then you have a reporting requirement. Might be to your bank or credit card processor. So you need to do that. PCI compliance failures often involve paying penalties and fines and things like that. So look into that. HIPAA is the standard for keeping confidential medical information secure in the United States. So if you are dealing with records from doctors' offices or something, it's similar to PCI. There's a series of like tests to make sure you're using the right levels of technology, versions of various pieces of technology, and there are reporting requirements if you screwed up. Back to basics. A Drupal website. One thing I really like about Drupal is all it is a bunch of PHP and a database. This isn't the case for every CMS I've used. I won't name the exceptions, but we all know how to read PHP, and we all know how to look at a database row in a database table and see if it makes sense to us. So to recover your site, you just need to clean your database, your script, your PHP code base, and your user contributed files. So that's your problem space. So if you have a backup for your database, certainly by far the best thing to do, since you've already worked back and established when the intrusion happened, you want to roll back to a database that happened, backup that was taken before then. So you want to reset to everything to the state where you were vulnerable but not yet attacked. Repair the problem that that made you vulnerable, and then make your site public again. There's often been user content that was added since that backup was taken. Hopefully you're taking backups, like say nightly, at least over the past week, so you don't have too much user data to look at. You will need to manually inspect and review and reinsert any content from your database that was added after your database backup was taken, of course. If you don't have backups, step one is start taking back. Oops, I'm very sorry. It's the first time I'm using this little clicker. It's very handy, but I need to fiddle with it slightly less. There. If you don't have backups, step one is start taking backups. Step two, yeah, this is a lesson everyone learns the hard way. So if you can be one of the lucky few who has learned from other people's mistakes and has started taking good backups, then congratulations. I am not in that club. It's a very small one, but I have since learned the hard way. If you don't have backups, then you need to inspect the copy of the database that you took and remove anything that looks like spam, and even more importantly, anything that looks like PHP, anything that looks like JavaScript. You want to make the PHP filter module, which fortunately isn't in core anymore in Drupal 8. You need to make sure that's still disabled. And to the extent possible, because it's always... Has anyone here read the PCI compliance white paper? It's pretty detailed. Let's see, 2 hands went up. Right. Is anyone else here dealing with credit card transactions in any way? No money ever goes through your websites.
Where I worked, we had a website that dealt with credit cards. I wasn't directly involved in it. But
not you. Okay.
They switched to a platform which does all the credit card transactions.
That's an excellent decision. Yeah. The PCI compliance, basically you want to keep your exposure as small as possible. Like you don't want to store the credit card number. That's if You really, really don't want to do that. The next thing to do is to avoid having the credit card number even go through any PHP files on your or database on your website. So that, for example, you could you could just embed an iframe or link to PayPal. Those are these are the naive ways to do it. You want to keep your exposure as small as possible, and that makes your compliance and reporting requirements as small as possible, which is a good thing. So this might be, recovering from this might be a good time to start to go and look at a different API that would reduce your exposure, for example, so that you touch that credit card number as little as possible. User files. So you can again, you should have backups, and then all you need to do is look at any file that was created since the last backup, inspect them and make sure they make sense, and then copy them forward. If you don't have backups, again, look at the timestamp, use the Unix file command, start taking backups. Remember that if you just type ls, you of course don't see everything. I mention this because there's a classic attacker directory called ... that people often don't think to look for, and that could contain lots of fun stuff. So don't forget the hidden files.
I had a website, it wasn't a Drupal website, but the hacker changed the .htaccess file to change where the error path went offsite to a Viagra site.
Okay.
So anybody who hit my site and hit a
Like a 404 error
404
was
went out,
redirecting. Yeah.
and that screwed up my Google Analytics and Google stuff.
Yeah.
To no end.
Yeah. Yeah, Google doesn't like it if you redirect to those sorts of web pages. They notice.
This was a few years ago before
Yeah.
they did that, but all of a sudden I had thousands of hits on my site. What the hell's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. So did I see another hint?
What happened if you don't know exactly the time that the attack happened?
Well, you could. Yeah.
Like your user reported too late. Maybe like,
Yeah. So it was.
several days after.
So the attack happened, and you only found out about it like a week later or something.
Yeah.
Well, you need to. Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, one of the first steps is figuring out how people got in. So you look at the problem that they report. You figure out how that problem could have been created, like how that spam page could have, like who's the user who created that page, for example, and then you go and look at your logs so you can see the post requests that created that particular problem. You look at other hits to your web server from that same IP address, for example. You should be able to figure it out pretty quickly.
Shouldn't the files, like the spam files, be date stamped, time stamped?
Yeah.
Can't really trust them.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can write the file, you can write any timestamp.
Yeah.
Do you think people are really going to go to that effort?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's again that would take shell access normally, but there's ways to change the time that you see.
Okay.
So don't necessarily trust that.
Yeah.
I mean, for that, if somebody got root on your machine, they could even change the file command so that it reports something that's wrong. I mean, you can
In my
get.
scenario several years ago, we used D6, so we allow the user add content on the site.
Yeah.
And when the hacker, go to the phone filter, putting spam, and actually putting a script that redirect to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it take a while to figure out, what time you inserting that particular content.
Yeah. Yeah, but the first step is definitely figuring out where the open door was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that you know what to close. The code base. Yeah, so again, I'm assuming you've got backups, or probably it's in Git or something equivalent. So you then, if it's in Git, it's very simple. You just run a git diff and see what's changed. Maybe the attack was only in the index.php file. Maybe everything's just in the database, but you need to know it's different. If you don't have your stuff in Git, then this becomes much more complicated. How I've solved this in the past is I've just gone and downloaded like a new copy of Drupal in a completely different directory, a new copy of all of the contrib modules, a new copy of all of the libraries from Drupal.org. Then you get to go and inspect. Then the things you need to manually inspect are reduced to custom modules, features, the themes, and those you can manually check. Here's an alias I use all the time in Drupal 7, for example, to look for any features that are overridden in the database. So for example, actually this isn't even specific to security issues, but if you have users who are changing a view on the production site and you want to know what's changed relative to your Drupal 7 features, I use this alias to just give me so this will print out a list of all the features that have changed, and it will create a file called featurename.diff, which has a diff in it that you can go and inspect. So this should always return nothing on a production site, because you should always keep your features up to date. There's a module called hacked. It's a great idea. So it will go and compare core plus contrib modules to copies from Drupal.org. So if you have used 7.x, like 3.2 or whatever, it'll go get that same version and then do a diff and then tell you if there are any changes. Great idea, but it reports files that are changed, it reports files that have been removed, it does not report files that were added. So that's not good enough when you're dealing with a security problem. There's this here is a link to the relevant ticket in the Drupal.org issue queue for that module. There's some discussion of the best way to do it, which is sort of been lingering. But if you've got the time to help work on that patch, that would be great. But as it is, yeah, don't. It's a useful report, but it's not the only thing you can look at.
So can you go back one?
Yeah.
What's in that grep statement you're running? What's drushft?
Drushfl?
No, well actually, what are both of those? Drushfl and
sorry, yeah, these are the short versions. I guess I should have written the long ones for readability. Drush feature list. If you just type Drush features, it's the same thing. So this is just the first one. This just gives you a list of every feature on your website.
Okay.
Here, I'm stripping out the ones that aren't listed as overridden or needs review.
Okay.
Then here I'm just cutting out the words enabled, etc., so that I just have the list of the module itself.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm making that list in here in these brackets. Then I'm doing a for loop over that list, and for each one. So now I've got a list just of like the 3 modules that have changes. Mm-hmm. For each of those, I print the name of the module, mm-hmm. And then I do drush feature diff,
okay.
that module into that module.diff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
That's it. And again, yes, these slides are online, so you don't need to frantically copy that. Or maybe you've got photographic memory, in which case I'm jealous. How do I recover the server? So we haven't talked about this yet. If your website is well configured, then the PHP process can only write to the Drupal user contributed files directory. So the public, private, and temporary directories. The PHP files themselves, index.php, all of that, should be read-only to your PHP process. This is particularly easy to set up in the case of PHP FPM and Nginx, but this can be done with Apache as well. Or ideally, it's actually on a separate mount point, and it's just read-only. Then, if this is your setup, then you know that an attacker who is running processes, running PHP processes that were nefarious, could not possibly have changed index.php. This is a good thing. If this is not your setup, then you need to go check those files. Hypothetically, they could be, for example, again in Drupalgeddon, you could get to a state where the person was running arbitrary commands, because of course you could just run php exec. The person could have used that to download a binary file into temp and run that and gotten shell access on your machine. And then you've got a whole other set of problems. Then you can't trust any binary sitting on the file. sitting on the file system. What you want to do here is throw away the machine. I'm guessing most of us are probably using a virtual machine or a container or something like that, and so it's time to just scrap it. If you have any doubt at all that the person was running random Unix commands on your computer. If you don't, then you're going to have a whole other set of problems. If you are running a shared hosting environment of some sort, which not many people do now, probably anyone in this room happen to do that? No, yeah, so I guessed. There are ways to configure your web service that each PHP process happens as a different user, so that an evil user or a user that got attacked can't start writing over the files of all your other users. So that's a good thing. How do you better prepare / avoid this? Yes, always apply your security updates because you're going to start following the Drupal security announcement list if you're not already. You will have regular backups, which are good for many, many reasons, including this. You're going to put your code into Git or Bitbucket or whatever you want to use. And you're going to have a plan to recover anything that's in your .git ignore files, so like user uploaded pictures, etc. And you're going to use something like a virtual machine that you can remotely wipe and reinstall. So, for example, if your development process involves spinning up Docker containers on your local computer, and then you do exactly the same thing on a server to bring up your production instances, then it's very cheap and easy, and you've tested this process often, to spin up a new production environment. So you should be ready to do that. There could be any number of things in your git ignore file for that particular client, so be aware of what's there and how to recover it. Any questions about that? No? Okay. A couple other resources. The security team has a relatively short document called Your Drupal Site Got Hacked, Now What? Which goes through a lot of these similar steps, so there's a good checklist there. Security review is a module that will go. Security review will not tell you that your site is secure. Security review will tell you if your site is insecure in any one of a defined set of ways, which is different but also useful. There's currently dev release for Drupal 8. The D7 version is stable, so this is a good thing to run on a regular basis, at least once. Site audit. This is a much more general checklist of a wide variety of things. This is the module which powers the checklist that you might have seen on the Pantheon status page for your website, for example. This includes a few very basic security checks. Like a favorite one is to go into the menu router and insert some code that does something nasty anytime someone clicks on a specific link, for example, so this will find that. There is a patch outstanding to make the site audit module run the list of tests in the security review module. That's I'm not sure why that's never landed, but that would certainly be a good thing. Drupalgeddon with an L is a module, a drush command to be precise, that will run a series of automated tests for signatures of the Drupalgeddon without an L vulnerability. At this point it's been several years. If you still have a site that hasn't been patched against that, good luck to you. But it's interesting reading for an example of a process to deal with an extreme security problem, and there's a further list of other reading and resources there. So there's a flow chart to tell you what you need to do to recover from this specific intrusion, and and the general principles certainly would apply to others. All right, previous vendor recovery. Has anyone had to do this? I see a couple hands. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Previous vendors. Sometimes they're great, and sometimes, oh boy. Yeah, So here I find the hacked module useful. So you've got some Drupal website and it's got a bunch of crazy patches and you have no idea why, and you start to get the hunch that maybe some of them aren't the kind of patch that you would have written. So well, I'm not going to name the particular site, but the one time in particular I'm thinking of, I started by running the hacked module and making a list of all the patches. Some of them were totally reasonable patches from Drupal.org. Some of them were not. Most of them were not documented in this case. So you should be aware of every patch that's on your website. There are a variety of conventions for doing this. In Drupal 7, I've often put patches into. So you have a module. Your directory cites all modules. Then inside of that, I would have a subdirectory called contrib, one called custom, one called features, and then I'd have another one called patches, in which I would collect the .patch files that I've applied to that particular project, and all of that is going into Git and is versioned. The convention on Drupal.org is to name your patch files in a specific way. So you start with the Drupal.org node ID, then you put a hyphen, and then you put the name of the module or project, and then you put another hyphen, and then you put a very short description of what the patch is doing. This is a very good naming scheme, and if somebody didn't do it, I would rename the patch so that I could go and find where on Drupal.org this silly thing came from. Oh, sorry, I forgot one step. There's you also put in the comment number from the Drupal.org issue, because often there's many versions of a patch, and you want to know which one you've got. So that you can go back later when you upgrade whatever module and see if that patch was already incorporated upstream, or if it needs to be re-rolled, or if the maintainer gave a very good reason for taking it out and you agree with them. You want to be able to find that. If you find patches that make sense but weren't on Drupal.org, then put them there. You should always put your patches on Drupal.org unless you're convinced that they make no sense. And in that case, I don't know why you wrote them. When you contribute your patches to Drupal.org, then the maintainers will see them, and then other people will give you feedback. They'll fix your bugs, because everyone has bugs, and then the patch will get rolled into a future stable version of the module, and that means you don't need to maintain the stupid patch anymore. So this is in your interest and everyone else's interest, so you should do that. So post your patches, everybody. Even if it's not perfect and production ready, if it gets half the way to the solution, put it up, and that'll help somebody finish it. It's like they say on Wikipedia, be bold. Yeah, so now you've looked at core and contrib for changes. Next, you need to look at the custom modules and the themes that this previous vendor has written. Sometimes they just wrote something themselves, but they should have used some contrib module. Then you can just delete it. I personally consider it not a good practice to put code into a .module file when creating a Drupal feature. The features module is happy for you to do that, and it will keep that code around when you rebuild the feature. But it just makes things messy, in my personal opinion. So I was surprised to see code there on this particular site. So go look. If the codebase is not already organized into separate subdirectories under sites all modules, go and do that. That will. This means, well, for example, on Drupal 7, this means you need to run drush registry rebuild one time, but it's worth it because then you know which modules are which. Typical mistakes I have seen. There's a whole lot of not invented here, like somebody who just doesn't understand the Drupal API or doesn't know how to go look for a Drupal contrib module is going to just go rewrite something. I've seen, you just see a lot of people inserting code in silly places. This PHP module, for example, is often overused, so just large parts of logic get shoved into code that's written in the browser and in the body of a node. Views PHP, that's another one. The Views PHP is you should probably be using hooks instead. Views PHP just lets you tinker with the output of a view using random bits of little PHP, because views doesn't let you do everything. But too much logic is sometimes placed there. Computed field is another one. The computed field module just lets you define the value of a field with, again, random PHP function or something. So that is sometimes useful, but is often overused. And definitely, if you're using any of those things, don't write the PHP in the browser. It's like the worst possible IDE anyone could imagine. If you have a syntax error and you forget a semicolon there, you're just going to like bring your site down, or at least that page down. So make everything just a function call to a file that's actually in Git. Computed field is good that way. You can just write computed field, then the name of your field, then compute, and the computed field module will know to go look at that function in your and not in the database. You can write block hooks to control block visibility instead of PHP. Again, panel visibility, I mentioned this before. In Drupal 7, you need to write PHP to do that, but your PHP should consist of nothing but one function name, and then that function is defined in something that's actually in Git and has comments, and that you can open in whatever IDE or editor you're using, etc. Other mistakes. Weird patches to contrib and especially to core. Once I found a collection of these in a public GitHub repo. They weren't on Drupal.org, so I had to go copy them and put them upstream. I saw an interesting example once where somebody had hacked core to enable inheritance of multiple install profiles for no particularly good reason, so that you could have, instead of having just one install profile, you could have a series of them and bring in different modules from different places. So that made no sense, and so I gleefully ripped that out. Another one I've seen multiple people do is use, in Drupal 7, is use the UUID features module. UUID features is a way to take content and dump it into a feature, and that sounds really great. So your about page is just like in a feature, it's in code. This is a reasonable thing to want to do, but it turns out in Drupal 7 that doing that requires a bunch of weird core patches. The module actually ships with a patch that you have to apply to core, which will never be accepted into core, so you have to do it yourself. If you want to stage content like this, figure out a different way. For example, put it all into CSV files and then use the migrate module, and then write a deploy, hook deploy n function that will will load that content in when you spin up a copy of your site, for example. Like don't use UUID features. I've seen, well, I did it once. I learned my lesson. Then I've had to clean up after 3 or 4 other people who did it. Yeah, sorry. 10 minutes left. Oh, thank you. I'll speak slightly faster. I've seen way too much custom logic and use PHP, and then a common one is to just dump everything into the template layer, the theme layer, sorry, because that's what, I mean, if you're seeing Drupal for the first time and you don't know what you're doing and you just want to write a custom function, the most obvious way is to just start like writing your logic right in the theme, and so people do that. This is not possible in twig files. In Drupal 8, that's good. But in Drupal 7, I would see that. I once saw somebody, as I mentioned here in the second point, somebody basically rewrote views and rewrote the T function in SQL queries in theme files. Does that sound like a good idea to anybody in this room? Right. So I know none of you were the vendor responsible for that. Hard-coded node IDs, user term IDs. I see those especially in the template layer. References to hard-coded titles. So like if title equals X, then whatever in a page template. You're probably doing something wrong if that happens. And when you see things like this, that means that the Drupal site just doesn't make sense, and so you should probably go look for security problems. Because somebody didn't know what they were doing in one part of Drupal, and that's probably means that the same is true of the rest of the work they did on that project. Finally, for anyone here who is not working in-house for one agency, but for one organization, but is working on sites for external clients, when you discover problems like this from a previous vendor, you now have stakeholder expectation management to do. This means that you need to sit down and somehow explain to them that everything wasn't working fine last week. This is sometimes difficult. If you're seeing a site for the first time, a good trick to get out of obligations you don't want to have is to tell the client you will bid on an audit, and you'll do that audit and report to them what's wrong with their site. Then after that, you will bid on fixing it. And this means you can make that number for the second bid higher if you realize just how screwed up the site is. So that will protect you a bit. Be aware that the client is bad at working with vendors and reviewing their work. Maybe they're just not technical people through no fault of their own, but it will probably mean that a less sophisticated client means you're likely going to spend more time explaining things to them, maybe doing some training, so budget for that. And if you can't convince them how broken the site is, then maybe you don't want this client. And if the client hasn't already figured out that they had a serious problem, and certainly if you can't convince them, if they can convince themselves, then that counts more than you trying to convince them, so be wary. With that, since I'm almost out of time, does anyone have any questions, advice, suggestions, condolences, war stories?
I had a contract to do a Drupal, I think it was a Drupal 6 site.
Yep.
And I got it up and running for them. About a year later, they called me up and said, help.
Right.
You know, somebody had gone in and deleted index.php. I tracked it down, they had some security holes.
Yep.
At that time, I thought I had left them set up with the backup, but they hadn't been doing it.
Right.
Luckily, I still had code on my development server.
You had a copy of.
I had a copy of the site, I moved it back, I got them set up with the backup.
Yeah.
And fixed their security hole. In the meantime, I had discovered I had left a bug in their system, so I fixed that.
That was very nice of you. Yeah.
Without charging.
Yeah.
But it was one of these where they had problems on their server and somebody got in.
Yep.
So about a year later, they moved to WordPress, so I don't know what they're doing now.
Well, hopefully they're updating that.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
but I've seen contributors to WordPress with viruses in them.
Well, there isn't even I know WordPress is like three times more of the internet or something than Drupal. It's like something like 15% as opposed to 5%. But there's no centralized security. But you can get security announcements for like the core of WordPress, but the modules, there isn't a central place to download them. There isn't a central place to report a security issue. Like all of this infrastructure around Drupal.org is just not there, as far as I can tell. So you should be, But companies like Pantheon will host it for you and take care of some of those details. So maybe I would do that. Yeah.
My favorite anecdote was teaching my very first client while I was still in college the importance of WordPress updates. I had made a small WordPress site for them, and they launched it, and then they never paid me. And so we had talked about me potentially like doing a small maintenance contract, a little bit of money every now and then to update it. And I sent them some documentation, and the check was in the mail for like months, and they sent me an email, and they were like, "Oh my God, you hacked our site!" And I was like, "No, I didn't." And they were like, "Well, somebody did." And I was like, "All right, well, 1, it wasn't me, and 2, you should probably pay me, and 3, you should also, probably call the hosting company and have them restore it, but I don't want to have anything to do with it."
Yeah.
They did eventually pay me, and I didn't want to do any more work for them, but they learned a very important lesson.
Yeah.
And I also learned a very important lesson about contracts.
Yeah.
But yes, that was a good bit of karma, I think, too.
Yeah, I remember somebody didn't want to pay me to fix a security issue on their site. Actually, this has happened to me a few times. I've told a client, look, you can. I just noticed you've got the security patch that needs to be installed. Pay me and I'll do it. And they've said no, and then sure enough, like a couple months later, they contact me and say, okay, well, we had an intrusion, so now instead of paying you for like 2 hours of work, I'm gonna have to pay you for 30 hours of work to clean it up. And yeah, you'd think they'd learn.
Yeah, I don't even know what happened because I never looked at it. But all I know is that no one had been updating it, and somebody got in.
So the predictable thing happened. Yeah. Funny that.
I think I saw Go earlier, but like I've been preaching for a while, like if you Venn diagram your file system, there should be no overlap between where Apache can write files and where Apache can execute PHP.
That's an excellent idea. Yeah. Yes, he was just saying there should be no overlap between files that Apache executes and the files that Apache writes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can save lots of interesting problems that way. Yeah.
This isn't pertaining to web servers or Drupal, or it's just a general security issue, which I found a long time ago on a server where all of a sudden people who had accounts, people on the server were getting email from somebody who had never logged into the server.
Right.
So this was not even Unix, this was OpenVMS.
Mm-hmm. Oh, jeez.
And it goes back a days.
Yeah.
And I was system manager of the system, and I put in all sorts of traces and figured out exactly who did it, how he did it, and the steps he did to do it, social engineering to get to a privileged account.
Right.
I was about to go to management with all the findings when he resigned.
Right.
But it turns out that he didn't need to do it that way. He could have done it from his non-privileged account because there was a bug in DECnet.
Okay. Right.
So he could have done it with DECnet with no problem. But
Right.
he went and did it the hard way.
And made you notice.
Yeah. So he got noticed, and I've been interested in security ever since.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if anybody knows, has been using OpenVMS,
It's been a while. I have.
It's being revived.
Oh my god. That's I don't know why someone would do that, but all right.
They're porting it to the x86 chip.
That's funny. Any other stories or questions? We've got 1 minute left. Is that it? Okay. Well, thanks all for showing up.